On the 9th of March, 2019, a helicopter lowered a wooden crate over a bone-white scar in the Colombian Andes, and inside, it was a lowland tapir, one of 18, sent to bring an 11,000-hectare dead forest back from nothing. Subscribe and hit the bell. There are more of these comeback stories than you'd believe, and you won't want to miss the next one. Everyone assumed the mission was survival. Keep them alive in a ruined place. Feed them, watch them, hope a handful made it through the first dry season. Survival turned out to be the easy part. The place was called Serranía de las Quinjas, and from the air, it barely looked like a forest at all. Stumps to the horizon, cracked earth so pale it threw the sunlight back up at the sky. The kind of ground where you stop expecting anything green. And into that, 18 animals. Just 18. Sit with that number for a second, because it's almost absurd. 11,000 hectares had been gutted, an area you could walk across for the better part of 2 days and never leave the damage. Against that, 18 tapirs. On paper, it's not a rescue. It's a rounding error. It's the sort of ratio that makes a serious ecologist quietly close the file. Picture that ground for a moment, baked white, nothing green, and 18 animals walking into it. That's the whole plan. That's everything they had. Now here's the part I still find hard to believe. Within 4 years, the survey crews who came back to count things on that dead ground stopped counting. They just stood there. Something was coming up out of the bare earth that none of them had planted, in numbers that didn't fit anything in their training. One of the botanists later admitted they simply couldn't fully explain what they were looking at. I'm not going to tell you what it was yet. You need the rest of the story first, or it won't hit the way it hit them. I'm Peter, and this is the full story of how 18 tapirs planted a forest back to life. We'll go through what a tapir actually is, because you've almost certainly got the wrong picture in your head. We'll walk through how a rainforest this size dies, which is stranger than it sounds. We'll get to the one quiet mechanism that did all the real work. And we'll end on the day the crews stopped counting. So let's start with the animal itself, because everything turns on it. If you've never really looked at a lowland tapir, here's what you're dealing with. A body the weight of a small pony, call it 1/4 of a ton of muscle moving low through the undergrowth, dark, almost seal-smooth hide, small eyes, and then this remarkable snout, a short, flexible trunk it uses like a hand, reaching up and curling around fruit and stripping it clean off the branch. But the snout isn't the point. What matters is what happens after the fruit goes in. Inside that animal is a slow, warm, moving gut, and that gut is, quite literally, a mobile plant nursery. A tapir eats fruit in one place, walks for hours, and sets the seeds down somewhere else entirely, whole and alive and wrapped in their own fertilizer. It doesn't know it's doing this. It's just walking and eating and living. But the effect is a machine for moving forests around. And that's the thing to hold on to. A tapir isn't a resident of the forest. It's the machinery of the forest. 64 million years of these animals doing exactly this, and we only measured it properly a few seasons ago. But to understand what those 18 animals did, you first have to understand how a rainforest this size actually dies, and it did not die the way you think. The trees were the last thing to go. From the 1980s, the chainsaws came for the biggest hardwoods first. Selective logging, they called it. You don't clear everything at once. You take the giants, the tall, slow, valuable ones, and you leave the rest standing. So from a distance, the forest still looks alive. It's a beautiful lie told by the treetops. Then came the roads. A road cut into a forest is never just a road. It's a wound that keeps bleeding, and everything follows it in the trucks, the hunters, the settlers, the dry air. And where there's a road and dry air, eventually there's fire. It creeps low across the forest floor, smoke drifting through bare trunks, and it finishes what the soars began. By 2015, the canopy was gone. And when the roof of a rainforest disappears, you don't just lose shade. You lose the animals that lived up there and moved through it. The woolly monkeys went first, then the guans, those big, turkey-sized birds, then the peccaries rooting along the ground. One by one, the forest fell silent. And here's where it gets strange, because you'd think the problem now is simple. Fewer trees. Plant more trees. Send in a crew, dig some holes, drop some seeds. That's what restoration usually means. But here's the part most people have never heard. And it's the whole reason this story works. A rainforest doesn't just need seeds to fall. It needs them carried far, away from the parent tree, where they'd only rot in the shade, and carried whole through a living gut. So the flesh strips off and the seed comes out ready to grow. Falling isn't enough. Movement is everything. Now, small birds handle the small seeds just fine. A tanager swallows a berry, flies off, drops it 100 meters away. That machinery still works, but the giant hardwoods, the ones that actually build a true forest, the towering canopy trees, they grow seeds the size of a plum, sometimes a fist, too big for any bird's throat, too heavy to blow on the wind. Those seeds need a large gut to move them, a big animal, eating big fruit, walking a long way, and leaving the seed somewhere new. Take that animal away and think about what happens next. Think of it this way. The big trees don't die out because their seeds vanish. They die out because nothing's left to carry them. The seeds still fall. They just fall straight down, under the mother tree, into the shade, and there they die. Generation after generation, the giants stop being replaced. The forest keeps its small trees and quietly loses its cathedral. Botanists have a name for this. Dispersal collapse. Kill the big animals, and the big trees simply stop being born. In plain terms, and this is the sentence I want you to hold on to, the forest forgets how to plant itself, and that reframes the whole tragedy. Serranía de las Quinchas hadn't run out of seeds. The seeds were still there, still viable, still waiting in the soil and the surviving trees. What that forest had lost was the courier. One job, one animal, 11,000 hectares of ruin. And the thing standing between it and a comeback wasn't a shortage of trees. It was the absence of a single set of legs willing to walk the seeds home. Which is why the rescue, when someone finally proposed it, sounded almost insulting in its simplicity. Don't replant. Don't send in 100 workers with 100,000 saplings. Put the disperser back and step away. So they went looking for the one animal that could do the carrying. An animal that walks up to 12 kilometers a night, eats fruit in the ruined edges, and moves it out onto the open ground no planting crew would ever bother to reach. Not a resident of the forest. The machinery of it. A mobile plant nursery on 4 legs, 18 of them against 11,000 hectares. So they opened the crates, let 18 tapirs walk into the ruin, and did the hardest thing of all, nothing. Then everyone waited. And what the survey crews finally knelt down and counted in the tapir dung is the thing no one had planted, and no one had predicted. They knelt in the open ground, out where nothing was supposed to grow, and they started counting. Green shoots, thick as grass, erupting from a single pile of tapir dung on the bare white clay. A field team on their knees, notebooks flat in the dust, tallying species one by one, because the number kept climbing past what anyone had written down. Here is what they found. A 2022 survey, led by researcher Mariana Ossa, counted 129 plant species germinating from tapir dung across the release zone. 129. from an animal a helicopter had lowered onto dead soil 3 years before. And then the detail that stunned the botanists. 9 of those were large seeded hardwoods. The big, slow, canopy-building trees. The ones with seeds too heavy for any bird to carry, the ones a restoration budget can almost never buy, because you cannot plant what you cannot source and grow. Nobody had planted them. No crew, no nursery, no grant. The tapirs had carried them in, whole, and set them down in tidy piles of natural fertilizer. One single dung pile alone sprouted over 400 seedlings. Picture that. 400 young trees rising from one animal's leavings. On ground, a planting crew had written off. And this is why it beat us. A human crew plants in rows near the roads where the trucks can reach. A tapir walks up to 12 kilometers a night, eats fruit in the ruined edges, and drops dozens of species at once, deep in the open scar where no one would ever haul a seedling tray. It doesn't plant a line. It plants everywhere. The forest was reseeding itself faster than any crew could work, and it was growing the exact trees restoration usually can't. The machinery of the forest was simply switched back on. Not a resident. A mobile plant nursery, out doing the one job it was built for. And I want to be honest with you about what this story does not solve. 18 tapirs cannot undo 11,000 hectares. That's the hard arithmetic, and it doesn't bend. Poaching still bleeds the edges of that forest. The roads are still there, still cutting. A snare doesn't care that the animal it kills is planting a canopy. So no, this isn't a cure. 18 against 11,000 was never going to be a cure. It's something quieter and, to me, more remarkable than a cure. It's a start that runs itself. A living engine. You set down once, and it keeps working long after the helicopter has gone home. And here is the detail that stayed with me, long after the numbers. The local Muisca-descended communities in those foothills have carried an old word for the tapir for generations. Not a scientific word. A word that means, roughly, the one who walks planting. Sit with that. Long before any survey team knelt in the dust with a notebook, long before anyone counted 129 species out of a pile of dung, the people who lived alongside this animal had already named it for exactly the thing it does. They watched it walk. They watched what came up behind it, and they named it the one who walks planting. Scientists measured, in 2022, a truth an old language had held for centuries. The word outlasted the forest. It waited. Through the logging and the roads and the fire, through the years, the canopy was gone, and the big animals with it. It waited for the animal to come back and prove it true. And the animal came back and proved it true. That, to me, is the heart of it. The forest never lost its seeds. It lost the one who carried them. Give that one back and step away, and the whole thing remembers how to build itself. So tell me in the comments which comeback story I should tell next, and subscribe. There are more of these than you'd believe. Quiet miracles all over the world, wherever someone finally stopped managing and started trusting. Somewhere over those foothills right now, the light coming up grey and cold, a helicopter is still lowering a crate over a white scar in the ground. Inside it, an animal that doesn't know it's a miracle. It only knows it's hungry and that it has a long way to walk tonight. And behind it, in the morning, something green will come up out of the dust. Thanks for watching.